Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, we are Webrecorder. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, we build tools that specialize in user-driven forms of web archiving. And so from the beginning, our goal has always been to build quality open source tools to enable web archiving for all, for a wide range of individuals, to allow anyone with a browser to go ahead and create their own web archives to accurately replay them at a later time. The goal of our tools are really to provide high quality, accurate captures and replays. And at Webrecorder, we provide a host of tools. So today, this webinar is focused on Browsertrix, which is our automated browser-based crawling service at a scale. But we also have developed archive web page, a host of developer tools, and replay web page, which you'll hear a little bit more about later on in today's webinar. So in the last few years, we have been doing so much work to develop our tools to make them more user-friendly and accessible while also meeting archival standards. So in April 2022, we were featured in the Washington Post about how our tools are empowering librarians and archivists to save Ukraine's digital history. In April of 2024, we were featured in Black Enterprise magazine, how we are empowering different users to map different movements of social justice movements across California and the US. In May 2024, our file format of WAXI files was recognized as a recommended file format by the Library of Congress. And in June 2024, our founder, Ilya, was interviewed by a fellow journalist, sharing a bit more about how our tools empower journalists to save first drafts of history. So the current Browsertrix users are a wide range of users. Our users include British Library, UK Web Archive, the National Library of New Zealand, Stanford University Press, the National Archives of Quebec, Urban Bushwomen. And aside from these huge national libraries and dance companies, a lot of our users also include journalists, independent archivists, marketing experts. And so we're really excited here at Webrecorder to see folks who are web archiving continue to engage with our materials and grow the landscape of who is showing up in the world as web archivists. You can take it away, Tessa.
So we're going to focus today's webinar on Browsertrix, which, as Camille mentioned, is our sort of automated large-scale web archiving platform. Also happy towards the end to answer questions about some of our other tools if people have them. Camille mentioned already Archive Web Page, which is a Chrome browser extension, which allows you to create archives just as you browse manually in your own browser, which can be a really great kind of introductory tool or tool for sites that require a lot of user interaction. But Browsertrix is a cloud-native web archiving system. The idea is that it has all of the features that you would need to create, schedule, manage, and share web archives in a kind of modern, friendly user interface right in your browser. There's a couple features that really distinguish Browsertrix from similar sorts of web archiving services. One of them, fundamentally, is that, like the rest of Webrecorder tools, Browsertrix is browser-based. What that means is that our crawler uses real, actual browsers to do the crawling so that the web archives that are created are as close to the user experience of a normal user interacting with those websites on their own browser as possible. That also enables us to do some really cool things like browser profiles. So you'll see hands-on, even have the ability to create one yourself if you'd like. Browsertrix has the ability to essentially spin up a browser, which gets spun up in the cloud, but interact with it straight through the user interface, to go ahead and log into sites, accept cookie pop-ups, change browser settings, and then save that state and crawl with it later, which enables you to easily do things like crawling content that's stuck behind paywalls, crawling content on social media and other sites where feeds might be individualized, different per user and even per session. So essentially, we give you the power to do automated crawls with a lot of the same flexibility that you would have if you were recording an archiving session within your own browser. You can also view the live progress of crawls as they go. We screencast the remote browsers right into the user interface and have the ability to kind of see what pages are being queued as the crawler runs and even exclude them. So you can, in real time, for example, identify crawler traps, sites that may kind of get stuck on the same URL with just combinations of different query parameters indefinitely. If you see something like that, we have the ability to be able to exclude it from your crawl in real time, so you don't have to stop and reconfigure and then restart something. We also have curation and sharing features, which in Browsertrix are predominantly organized in our collection feature. So we'll demonstrate that a little bit as well. That allows you to combine content from different crawls and even uploaded Waxy files that maybe you created with another tool into specific curated collections that you can share with end users or use yourselves to organize content into certain views that are useful for your team. And finally, we're really excited about a feature that we developed just this year, which is assistive quality assurance on crawls. So we'll show you how this works, but essentially we have a process where after crawling content, you can run what we call an analysis run, and it will go over all the pages in the crawl, loading them in replay and compare screenshots and extracted text from the replay against what the browser saw on the live web when the original crawling happened, which can be really useful, especially in larger crawls, to kind of point out if there are any potential issues with the crawl that might require like a slightly different approach to archiving. At this point, I'm going to jump out of the presentation and go into Browsertrix. So in a minute, we will set it up so that you can jump right in as well. But right off the bat, I just want to give you, while everyone has undivided attention, a little bit of an introduction. So this is Browsertrix. Browsertrix is a multi-tenant organization, which means you as a multi-tenant application, rather, which means that you as a user have your own organization within Browsertrix. This is what we're looking at now, the Webrecorder demos organization. You can see if you belong to multiple, you have the ability to swap between them. But this means basically everyone on your team can have a shared organization, shared data where you can collaborate together on your web archives and where no one else can see your data. We have when you first log in, a sort of overview page here, which has some information about how much content has been crawled and the usage history over time. But I know that we want to get right into the good stuff. So let's go ahead and just look at what it takes to create a crawl. So to do that, we can go right to this Create New button here. And what we're going to want to do is to create a crawl workflow. In Browsertrix, workflows are essentially the crawl configuration. It is it's settings, if you will, that you can put together and then run one or multiple crawls from moving on into the future. Minimally, all we have to do to create a crawl workflow is to tell the crawler what it is that we want it to crawl, and then maybe give it a name. So right off the bat, the first option that you have is crawl scope. We have a number of different crawl scopes in Browsertrix that are kind of tuned to different use cases. So if there's just a single page that you want to capture, we have an option for that. You just put in a single URL and it'll go capture that page. That might be useful, for example, for like a social media profile page or another page that kind of has infinite scroll where you want it to stay on that URL, but just kind of keep going for a little while. We also have the ability to do a list of pages if you have a handful of URLs or many URLs, and you know exactly which pages you want to capture. But probably most of the time, people want to do site crawls. Our kind of typical standard version of this is a pages in the same directory crawl scope. So what this means is that what we're going to do is tell Browsertrix what URL we want it to start on, and then it will automatically discover links and add more pages to the crawl up until the kind of predefined scope that we gave it, or until it runs out of URLs. So for example, if we wanted to crawl Webrecorder's website, webrecorder.net, we can put that in as the crawl start URL right there. And we have this kind of auto updated help text here that'll say it'll crawl all pages and paths that start with https webrecorder.net. There are some other options here. We can come back to those in a little bit. A popular one is to include any linked pages or one hops out. So it will go ahead and follow links just that one time, even if they don't fit within the same scope as the majority of our crawl. But in the interest of simplicity, now that we've entered our scope type and our crawl start URL, all we have to do to run a crawl is go to review and save, and then click save workflow. That said, right now, I'm going to go back and just show a couple of the options that I think demonstrate some of Browsertrix capabilities. So we already looked at scope a little bit. We have the ability to set a number of different limits. This can be useful for making sure that your crawls don't run longer than you want to or capture more content than you want to. And there are also a number of timeouts that can be modified to change the behavior of the crawler on the page, either to be, say, more polite to the sites that you're crawling, or say if you know there are pages with infinite scroll, maybe you want to make sure that it stays on the page for a lot longer. You can increase the behavior timeout, which is what runs our auto scroll. For this demo, because it's a demo, we want it to be fairly quick. So I'm just going to put in a limit of 20 pages. Continue on. The browser settings section is interesting, and one of the things that differentiates Browsertrix from a number of similar tools. So like I mentioned earlier, we have in Browsertrix the ability to create browser profiles and to customize the behavior of the real browsers that are doing the crawl for us. So we have the option here to select from any browser profiles that we might have created before. We're not going to use one in this crawl, but we can come back around to that in a little bit. We have a handful of other features here. If you want to add a custom user agent so that you can identify yourself to a publisher, for instance, we have the ability to do that. You can customize the number of browser windows that run at a time in the crawl. And one feature that we just recently added, and we're kind of slowly rolling out to customers on our pro tiers, is the ability to crawl through proxy servers. So we can set up a proxy server within a certain geographical location, say, and then all of the crawling traffic will go through that proxy. So to the sites that you're crawling, say if we have a proxy in New York, even though our production instance is hosted in Amsterdam, all the sites that we crawl will see that traffic as coming from New York, which can be really helpful for both getting around geo-restricted content, but also for making sure that the content reflects the user experience that you want it to reflect. I mentioned earlier we have the ability to schedule crawls if we'd like. So by default, it'll just run it right away, but we could instead schedule this to run weekly, daily, or monthly and set the time for when that should happen. And we have the ability to add some metadata. In this case, we'll just add a name. SAA webinar first crawl. And now let's go ahead and run our crawl. So what's happening in the background is a number of our crawlers are spinning up in the cloud and spinning up real browsers. We use Brave browser, which is Chromium based. And those browsers are getting ready to start crawling for us. It takes sometimes 30 seconds, a minute, just because it takes a little bit for those resources to spin up in the cloud. But in a second here, we'll see that the crawl will begin to start and we'll have a live view into exactly what our crawler browsers are doing. Any second.
As the browser windows are loading, I just wanted to mention that on this page, you will continue to see the status update throughout the duration of the crawl. The total size will increase. And also, as the browsers are moving and crawling, you will have the option to view if there are any error logs or broken URLs on the sites that you're capturing. And you also have the ability to look at your settings in real time as well.
And here we go. So spun up, we can see we have 4 browser windows currently archiving, and we can see in real time exactly what they're doing. Below this, we also have the upcoming pages list. So this is where if you saw, especially if you're doing hops out or covering multiple domains, you could see if there was something in here that we didn't want, we have the ability to click into this edit exclusions editor and add patterns that we want the crawler to skip. In this case, because we only are doing 20 pages, the crawl is going pretty quickly. And there we go, we're done. So right away, we can go ahead and replay the crawl. So this is using replay web page, which is our client-side replay engine that is embedded into a number of our tools and also available independently. So this is the replay engine that is used in Archive web page, in Browsertrix, but you can also, if you have work or WAXI files and you just want to be able to replay them, can go to replayweb.page and interact with the same experience here. One thing to know is because I said that this was a client-side replay system, what that means is that it runs entirely in your browser. So if you go to replayweb.page and you upload some work or WAXI files to replay them, those files are not being uploaded to any external server. We at Webrecorder and no one else has access to them. Everything is happening within your own browser so that your data stays private, because we want people to really own their own data. Back in Browsertrix, so we have the ability to replay our web page here. We can see this is exactly what we would see if we went in our own browser. As we follow links, we'll see that the pages are all captured as they would expect. But if we go to something that wasn't in our crawl scope, for example, if we try to go to the forum, you can see that the archive page is not found, which means essentially, in a way, is kind of proof that this is replay that's happening from the web archive and not from the live web. You also have the ability in the crawl interface to just go ahead and download the crawl WAXI file. For anyone who's not familiar, WAXI is a file format that was developed and openly specified by Webrecorder that has gotten a significantly more usage in recent years. As Camille said up front, it's recognized as a preservation format by the Library of Congress. It's also used by the Internet Archive, by a number of different institutions. And essentially what it is a zip file that contains the ISO standard work files that are your actual web archive, with things like indices and some metadata and page lists that make that file both portable. So instead of a collection of work files, you have one file that you can download, share around, upload somewhere if you'd like. It also has some technical benefits which allow us to do much more efficient replay, because we can load only the data we need for a page instead of needing to load the entire work in order to be able to replay content. And you can download your WAXI file right here. And we can take a quick look. All right. We have our WAXI file that we just downloaded. A number of archive tools know how to unpack WAXIs now, which is great, which means you would normally never need to do this, but just for educational purposes, we can take a peek inside. So like I said, the WAXI file contains the work files of your actual web archive's content, as well as indexes in the CDXJ format, page lists, which contain information about each of the pages and which are used to provide a seamless user experience in replay, the crawl log even, and so we want you to be in control of your own data, to understand what's there, and we also want to facilitate you being able to easily manage these files. So we encourage everyone You're very welcome as a Browsertrix user to keep your files in our system, but we also encourage people to download them out and run them through digital preservation workflows, make sure you have them in multiple places, and follow all those best practices. That's kind of the basics of crawling. So I think at this point, what we should do is go ahead and get you access to Browsertrix so that people can run your own crawls as you'd like. And then as we're doing that, we can kind of iteratively look at some of the other features like collections and browser profiles. So I will put this up. Let us know if, actually, I will just put the link in the chat as well. So you can go to app.browsertrix.com/signup, and you will have the ability to create a user account. That user account will have access to a shared organization that we created just for this workshop called SAA Browsertrix Workshop. The data that's created and that organization will be just for this webinar. We'll have it deleted afterwards. But towards the end of the webinar, we'll also be sharing a link for you all to be able to try 7-day free trials of Browsertrix so that you can, on your own time, not so much in a rush, try it out and see if it's a good fit for you. So go ahead, everyone who wants to, go ahead and sign up, and we'll give you a few minutes here. I'll just leave the link here, and then we can take a look at doing some crawling together. All right, we've got at least one person in. That's great. Okay, looks like people are having success here, so go ahead and switch over to that organization. Okay, we even got a crawl already. So yeah, once you're in the SAA Browsertrix Workshop organization, you can go ahead and do what I did and just create a new workflow. If you already know the kind of type that you want, you can use the little drop-down button here to jump right ahead and go ahead and try some things out. So while people are running some crawls, I just want to say feel free as you have questions to drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. And I can go ahead and maybe show you some of the other features that we were talking about so that you can try them yourself. So one of those is browser profiles. So in order to create a browser profile, you can go to the Browser Profiles tab here, and then New Browser Profile. And it's going to ask us for a starting URL. So this would be the page that you want to sign into. So for example, if we wanted to sign into, I don't know, do X. What this is doing in the background is it's spinning up a browser in the cloud, and then it's giving us an interactive window into it. So once we have this window, we can go ahead and do all the things that we want to do to get the browser in a state that we want to use for crawling. So here, since we have an account, we could go ahead and log in, enter our credentials, and then once everything is ready, we can save new profile. Not only can you do this for websites, you can even do this for the browser's own settings. So knowing that we use Brave, we can go to Brave //settings. And for example, Brave comes with some kind of sensible, moderate ad blocking and cookie blocking features built in by default that they call shields. Say we wanted to run a crawl and we didn't want to include that because the ads have archival value in this specific use case. We could go ahead and change these settings. We could disable tracker and ad blocking, not block fingerprinting, allow all cookies, for example, and then go ahead and save that profile and say ad blocking disabled. And we could go ahead and subsequently run crawls with that. When you have browser profiles that are already created, it's a good idea before you create a crawl to go ahead and make sure that they're still signed in. As you know, login sessions for websites tend to expire. So the way that you can do that is I have a browser profile created earlier that's logged into Webrecorder's X account. When you load that up, you can click Configure Browser Profile, and it will spin back that browser with the profile applied, so that we can make sure that it looks like in the shape that we want. And yeah, looks like we're still logged in, so that's great. We can click Cancel. And then if we wanted to create a crawl with that browser profile applied, go to Crawling, do New Workflow. Since we're going to do Webrecorder's profile page, we'll just do a single page. Say if we wanted to include some links out, we could include linked pages this time. And we'll just set a limit on 5 pages to keep that fast. And we'll go ahead and start that. And we'll be able to see in real time that the browser is crawling with that browser profile attached behind the login. Joseph had a question in the chat. Do you have a recommendation for test crawl limits for the webinar? I would say, I don't know, trust your gut, but try to keep it maybe under 50 pages or 100 pages, just so that it has time to complete and that you have time to, replay it and poke around and do all those other things. I think that this org has a hard limit of 1,000 pages per crawl workflow for this demo, but know that that's just a restriction of like for the webinar, and we have plans and users that regularly do crawls with many, many more pages than that. Question from Ashley: can Browsertrix get around robots.txt limits? Yeah, actually, in fact, at this point, Browsertrix doesn't check robots.txt. In part, that's because we see this as user-directed behavior. It may be in the future that we have options to kind of read and respect robots.txt, but at this point, what Browsertrix does is entirely in your control. And another question, can we bulk download Waxy files? So there's a few ways of getting your content out. If we can go back to the Browsertrix workshop. Oh, look at all this crawling. That's great. So there's a couple ways. You might notice if there's, let's see if any of these crawls are a bit larger. Like this one's a bit larger. If we click into this crawl, well, actually, this one still only has one Waxy file, but depending on the number of browser windows that you're using, sometimes a crawl can create multiple Waxy files. If that's so, you can download them by clicking each one individually. We also have this button to download the entire crawl as a single Waxy using what we call our multi-Waxy spec, which is a little more technical than I need to get in here, but in terms of our replay system and everything else, works exactly the same. We also have a backend API that powers everything that you see in the front end, and that as a Browsertrix user, if you have the technical skills to be able to, you have the full ability to use. That's probably the most efficient way to get out lots of files at once. The other thing that can work is to use collections. And that's one area that we haven't looked at yet, but we'll get to in a few minutes. That lets you basically combine multiple crawls into a single collection and then download that as a single Waxy file if you would like to. I have a question. Do I have to create a browser profile? How do I do that? No, you absolutely don't have to. That's really only if you want the features that browser profiles enable. So if you want to be able to crawl behind a login page, behind a paywall, or with kind of specific browser settings applied. One common thing is sometimes people create a browser profile to click through like privacy pop-ups and stuff, or Cloudflare crawler checks. As you likely have seen, with the increase in kind of AI crawlers, those Cloudflare checks are getting a lot more common these days. But with a browser profile, you could go to that page, click the I am a human, go through, the CAPTCHA or whatever, and then save that. And then if you apply that to your crawl, the crawl won't get stuck on those checks moving forward. But if you're just crawling stuff that's openly available on the web, then absolutely, you don't need to use them at all. See. Ashley says, is there a way to run a test crawl to see if the settings limits are correct and to gauge how much data a certain site might need for a proper call? So unlike Archivit, for example, we don't have a concept of test crawls in Browsertrix. Part of that is it's a lot easier to stop or cancel a crawl as it's going. But yeah, so we encourage people, if you want to do a kind of if you want to get a sense of the quality, maybe it makes sense to do a crawl with a page limit set lower first, just to see how it turns out, and then run a larger crawl later. But we also try in our platform to just give people as much flexibility as possible. But yeah, that's not that concept doesn't quite exist in Browsertrix in the same way that it does in some other services. Emily asked which browsers are supported. So our crawler runs in Brave browser, which is a Chromium-based browser. So it uses the same rendering engine and kind of underlying browser engine as Chromium or Chrome or Edge. There are ways, if you're very technically minded, to build a different Docker image if you're using our crawler separately outside of the Browsertrix web application to use a different browser. It's quite difficult, I'll say, or it's not like a straightforward thing. If there's something that you need another browser for some reason, we've done a lot of testing and have never really found any significant differences in rendering of websites between Brave and Chrome. But if you did specifically need Chrome, for example, for a site that checks what browser you're using or something, then Archive Web Page might be a good fit for that because you can install that directly into your own Chrome browser and archive from there. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of completed crawls, which is great. So let's go ahead and while we're doing this, take a look at the collections feature. So like I said, collections are a way to organize your crawls, to curate and share them. And to create a new collection, all we have to do is give it a name. We'll say this will be our SAA webinar test collection. We also, you can add a description, and we support Markdown here. So you could do things like styling. We'll go ahead and create that collection. So now we have an empty collection. What we have to do is add some content to it. We can click here on select items, and we see all of our crawl workflows. And from those, we can pick some content to add to our collection. If we want to add all of the crawls of a workflow, if it's crawled, many times over time, we can go ahead and just click the workflow here. If we only want to add one specific crawl, we could open up the crawl workflow and just say, like, okay, maybe we just want the latest one here. And I'm just going to click some random things to add here. One other thing to point out is we do have an auto add feature, which means that say you have a collection, just as an example, say you have a collection and it's like student life on campus, and you have 2 or 3 workflows that are set on a schedule to regularly crawl different like student group sites. You could set those workflows so that they all auto add to this collection, so that every time they run on that scheduled run, or every time you manually create a new crawl, that content automatically gets pushed to this collection without you needing to manually do anything, which can be a really great way of kind of automating a pipeline from, hey, we set up this crawl workflow or these crawl workflows, we pointed them to the collection that we want to be able to share with people, and then it'll automatically keep getting updated over time. Let's go ahead and save our collection. And what we can see is that now all of the content of all of these different crawls has been combined into a single replay interface with a page list of our starting points and all. You can see how this would be useful within a team, but it really gets more useful because we have the ability to then share this with other people. So we can go to share here. And by default, all collections, like everything else in Browsertrix, are private, only accessible to people with a login and that belong to your organization. But if we want to make this shareable, we can toggle this switch here, and that enables us to do 2 things. One is we get a link that I'll put in the chat here that we can share to anyone. We can link from our institutional website. We can share in a reference chat with users, and that enables them to go ahead and see this collection, even if they're not logged into Browsertrix. So to show you that, I'm going to go to a private window here and enter that link. And we have the collection replay the same way that it was when we were logged in, which is pretty cool. The other thing that this little modal gives you instructions on is how to then embed that collection directly into a website. I think this is one of the coolest things about Replay Web Page, which is that the way it's designed as a web component means that you can actually just embed it into a website just by using this custom HTML tag and pointing it to where the files or a JSON manifest of the web archive files lives. And we have much more detailed documentation on exactly how to do this in our Replay webpage documentation. So if you're interested in this, you can go ahead and add things. You can go ahead and take a look at this. But I want to just show you what that enables, because I think it's really, like as an archivist who engaged in some web archiving before moving to working on software, personally, I think this is one of the things I'm most excited about. So we use this on our own website. We go to webrecorder.net and we go into the tool page for Replay Web Page, our replay system. You can see we actually have our old website embedded directly into the new one using Replay Web Page. So this is being served from a web archive. And all that we need to do to enable that is to basically enable a service worker, add this custom HTML tag, and then point it to where that web archive lives, which could be in Browsertrix, or it could be just a waxy file in an S3 bucket somewhere. It's really you have a lot of flexibility on how this works. There are also folks that are doing this to provide online access to their collections. So kind of my go-to example for this, because I just love the way that they have instituted it, is the Feminist Institute. So they have an online digital archive interface here that allows you to see born digital and digitized content. And alongside other media types like images and audio and video, they have archived websites. And these websites were all created using Browsertrix, using Webrecorder tools like Archive Web Page and Browsertrix. And then this replay is being enabled through Replay Web Page. So here, same as if it was, digitized pages from a manuscript or images or video files, we have a number of different items that are archived websites. And if we click into one, they're using Replay Web Page to display the content for users right in their archived interface, the same way that you might have an IFFF viewer or a media player for video, something like that. So this is something that you can do, as a Browsertrix user. You can create web archives and then basically connect them to your website directly. But it's also something that you can do today with web archives that you have because Replay web page, like all of our tools, is free and open source. I'll also point out that we're working on iterating on the public collections feature currently. So right now you have the ability to share a collection via a link or to embed the collection into another website or web page. And soon, like in the coming months, on top of that, you'll have the ability to basically create a public organizational profile in Browsertrix, if you'd like, that has a list of public collections. So there'll be an index page that you can point someone to, only if you want to, that has a list of all your public collections so that they can browse through your public web archives, which we think will be really cool. We're trying to make sure that basically from conceptualization of I want to archive this website to getting it into your into your end user's hands, that we're enabling every step along the way. And yeah, if you would like to go ahead and create your own collections to play around with it, please feel free. I've been talking for a while here, so I will go ahead and pause for a minute and ask if people have questions.
I just wanted to add something real quick while we were
Please.
yeah, so actually I took a look at that collection. Yeah, if you go back to that collection, uh and so it looks like the bbu.edu links, I clicked on them, and it turned out that the page was blank, and so I was like, well, what's going on there? And so I took a quick look. Obviously it's always tricky to figure out what could be wrong, and it turns out that this is actually a blocking issue, that there was some sort of verification that was needed for that, because we're crawling from our server in the Netherlands, that this crawl, yeah, basically the site blocked the crawler. Uh, and so what I did was I actually created a browser profile, uh, and just loaded that site uh, uh, just on its own. And then I restarted that crawl with that browser profile applied, so I didn't have to do anything. It just loaded it. And so sometimes just loading the site and creating a profile is enough. And now if we look at the running crawls, it looks like that site is being crawled now. And so that's the kind of thing that browser profiles can really help with, is that there's some kind of, yeah, in addition to logging in, it just sometimes loading it just in a profile and creating it is enough to kind of get around the types of blocking that sites often do for crawlers. And so yeah, and so once this crawl is done, or we could just stop it, we can then replace it in the collection, replace the crawl that didn't work with the one that did in the collection. Yeah, so yeah, you could go ahead and stop it. And so yeah, that's kind of an example of some of the workflows that can be involved. It does involve some trial and error when it comes to things like captchas and blocking. Um, and yeah, the browser profiles really help with that, because they allow you to kind of get around captchas and yeah, and kind of things like that.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so we have swapped out our older BVU library crawl for the new one, and let's see how it does. We may still have an issue, unless I just clicked on the wrong one.
Yeah, try just purging. Yeah, hopefully that will help. Yes. Oh, maybe there's something else
There may
that
be a replay issue too. I mean, this is uh, the reality of web archiving is that our our tools work for the vast majority of the cases, but there's definitely an asymmetric relationship, right, between people trying to archive the web and everyone with billions of dollars of capital backing, constantly creating and innovating new things on the web. But that's also just part of our job. It's an ongoing process of finding out. Sometimes frameworks have new issues or sites try to implement different ways of blocking things, and then we figure it out. And usually when we have a replay issue and we solve it, it ends up solving that issue for like a whole host of related websites. Yeah.
and that also brings us to our uh, QA feature, which we'll talk about as well.
Yeah. That's a very good segue. Thank you. Yeah, so let's go ahead and try to find a crawl here
We
that
could try that crawl, or
that one had hundreds of pages, so I don't know that that's a. Oh,
okay,
actually,
yeah.
no, it only has 46 because it stopped. You're right. Let's go ahead. So we can use this crawl as an example. Maybe I'll start multiple because I'm not sure with the replay issue. This will be a good example of how it can highlight issues, but we might want a more typical example. But so yeah, from a crawl. So we have our crawl workflow here, and we click into it, and we have the list of crawls. And we want to QA this most recent one. We can go ahead to quality assurance and click run analysis. And so, like I said earlier, what this is doing is for each page in this web archive, when our crawler initially does the crawling, it takes screenshots and extracts text from what it's seeing on the actual live web pages. And then when we run this QA analysis process, what we do is we load up each page from that WAXI file into our replay engine. We take new screenshots and extracted text, and then we run some analysis to automatically compare those and create some metrics that you can use to understand the quality of your crawl. We see as it goes page by page, we'll have a kind of auto-updated progress bar here that kind of highlights at a glance how many pages seem to have been crawled and replaying well according to these various metrics. And then when this finishes, we'll be able to go into a review dashboard and check the pages sorted by the ones that are most likely to have issues. As that's running, I'll go ahead and also do that on another site. So let's see. We have one here with 20 pages, 23 pages. That seems like another good possibility. So let's go ahead and run analysis on that one as well. And that way we can have multiple examples to look at. Back to here. Oh, can't seem to get replay working yet. My crawl was used as an example. Interesting. Let's take a look at that. So that was NGA. Oh, it seems to be working for me. It's possible that it's like a local cache issue. or you might want to try another browser. It could be that there's a browser extension that's interfering or something like that. The other thing that you can try is in this replay pane, you can click this little kind of inverted hamburger icon and click purge cache and full reload, and that will also kind of update the replay, and maybe there was just a kind of glitch. All right, looks like we got a few people running QA analysis, which is cool. Love to see that. I'll also point out that on our Browsertrix service, because this is a new feature and we want people to try it out and we want to get user feedback from people, the way that our paid service works is the plans are organized along things like crawling execution time, so the actual amount of time that the crawlers, we try to match our pricing to kind of the things that incur costs, so that it's fair for y'all. But we are not including the time, the compute time required for QA. So essentially, this is a free feature for the next while, as we try to encourage people to use it and see how it works for them. All right, and we're getting pretty close. And actually, the interesting thing is this was the same page that we had issues loading the replay for. In a lot of cases, it's saying that the screenshots are a good match. So I'm curious to see what this means when we actually go into the review dashboard. And now that the QA run is complete, we can do that. So this is the QA review dashboard. You can see that we have a list of pages that we can sort along different criteria that are by default sorted by worst screenshot match. If we wanted to start with, the best things or look at text match or some other facets instead, we can do that. The idea here is that as an assistive technology, we're not trying to fully automate QA, but we're instead trying to point you to where your time and attention is best served. So especially if you're doing a crawl of thousands or tens of thousands of pages or even more, then we really want to be able to point you to say, hey, maybe you're not going to be able to review every page because we all know how much time we have in a day. But these 50 pages or these 5 pages seem to have issues, so you might want to focus your attention there. So in this case, we can see that, well, there are certainly some issues here. We have a screenshot from the crawl. The screenshot from analysis doesn't really seem to be loading. If we go to some other pages, it is interesting. I would actually have to look into this. I'm not sure why it's able to compute a screenshot match, but not load the screenshot into the frame here. That's a little unusual. But we knew that there was a replay issue with this site, so that's not too surprising. Well, let's go to a crawl. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, yeah, I think so. Yeah, if we go back to that, yeah, so I think that particular site has some sort of capture related thing that mostly happens on the first page, and so that's why I think it actually loads the captcha version and then reloads it again, and so the second version of the there are actually 2 copies of the page. The second one does work, but I think QA probably hits the first one. But then for the other pages, I think it only happens on the first.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, here we go.
So actually, most of the other pages are perfectly fine. It's just that first entry page that has that issue, and this QA process can kind of help you identify. It's like, well, I crawled 50 pages. Do any of them work? Are they all broken? And this kind of tells you, well, actually, most of them probably are fine. It's just the initial starting page that might be tricky because of that CAPTCHA verification thing. Um, which is, yeah, even with the profile, it's sort of, I think it's still loaded it initially or something. So something for us to investigate, but the crawl generally did work, as we can see from the QA here. Uh,
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really good to know. So since these other pages are working, I can use this to show a bit of some of the features here. So we can see in this case, the screenshots are about 100% identical, which is a good indication that the content was crawled well and is replaying well. For ones where they're a little bit further apart, so this one is 95%, for example, looking at this, you can kind of tell that there's an image that seems to have loaded here that maybe didn't load in time or for the screenshot on the live web. But sometimes it's harder to tell what exactly is missing. So we have the ability to change this to a kind of wipe view so that you can go back and forth between what the crawler saw on the live web and the replay. Interesting that the image loads in the replay, but was broken when the screenshot was taken. Sometimes these are just timing issues of when exactly the screenshot was taken. An element may not have quite loaded yet. You can see, I think, yeah, this one had a 90% text difference. So just to show you the interface here and how this might be useful. So we display the text that was extracted during a crawl, and then the text that was extracted during analysis, and then highlight the content where it differs. So it looks like during the crawl, we had this looks to be maybe a form that didn't quite load in replay by the time the text was extracted. And we also have a closing HTML tag in the replay. And so if we look at the screenshots, we can see, oh yeah, that's the form. So it's possible that either it just hadn't loaded by the time the screenshot was taken for QA, or that there's an actual replay issue. And so if we want to dive deeper, we can click over to replay for the same page and take a look and see if it loads. And it seems like, yeah, for this particular page, that form, for whatever reason, isn't loading in the replay. So we can make a note of that for everyone on our team and say, shoot with form loading replay. And then anyone else on our team who's kind of iteratively going through this QA process with us will be able to see that same data. We can also kind of mark whether the pages are acceptable or not on a per page basis. And when we finish the QA process, we have the ability to click finish review here and rate this crawl. And so overall, let's call this one fair. Most pages are great. Issue with entry point pages, CAPTCHA, and one web form. And then that data becomes reflected through the application. So if we go to our archived items list, which is basically just a list of all the crawls and uploads that we've created in an organization, we can see that QA rating is reflected here, and we have the ability to sort the data by QA rating so that if, say we're doing a lot of web archiving or a team, we have like student assistants working on it, we have processing archivists working on it, whatever. And we later want to say, okay, let's sort and just find the crawls that had an excellent QA rating so that we can download this out and move them to another system. You can do that if you only want to find the ones that had kind of a poorer QA rating so that you can focus on, hey, maybe we need to try some different workflow settings, or maybe we can try archive web page for these to kind of patch them or get content that was hard to get in an automated fashion. We try to reflect that data back to the application so it can kind of support you in your activities. If you have technical support or are technically minded, we also have webhooks in Browsertrix so that when certain events happen, it can automatically notify external systems. So we have webhooks that you can enable for when a crawl completes to go post a request to another system to say, hey, this crawl finished if you want to go download the data. Or you could set up a webhook for when QA has finished. And because that webhook contains the QA data, you could feasibly, fairly easily actually, do an integration with another system that says, hey, when a crawl is QA'd, if it's above this score, we'll go ahead and automatically grab the data and transfer it to our repository or something like that. That is, yeah.
There was a question about how to get here again for
Yeah. So there's two ways. From the archived items list, you can find your crawl. So I think this is the other one I ran QA on earlier, and go to the quality assurance tab. You can also get there from the crawl workflow.
I think the question is about the RCDOB crawl. So let's
RCDOB. Okay,
so
yeah. So we can go to the workflow and then click through into our crawl, and then it's the quality assurance tab on the left here.
And then you can click the review crawl button.
Yeah.
And that takes you to this breakdown. And so for this crawl, we can see that there was a so there's some low screenshot scores, mostly because of this ad pop-up that appeared in crawl time, but actually isn't there at replay time. So that's actually probably okay, but we might want to double check those pages that have the low the replay of those specific pages that are coming back with the lower scores. And so yeah, again, that's sort of the idea is to kind of identify pages which a human might want to check first out of all the pages in the crawl.
Got a page not found message when I clicked that button. Oh, I think we did find a bug around that and fixed it quite recently, but I don't know if that patch has been applied.
Yeah, it's yes, it'll be in the next release, but I think that the easiest is just to follow the same path that Tessa now did. If you go into crawling, and then click on the crawl from the crawl workflow, and then on the quality assurance tab, and then review crawl from there.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Camille for a little bit here. But in the meantime, as you have questions, as you're trying things, please feel free to continue adding questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, Tessa and Ilya, for really providing an in-depth walkthrough of our tools and lifting up a lot of new features, including QA, the ability to utilize browser profiles to capture content behind logins. And we've had a few questions in the chat and I've received a few emails, but I wanted to share a bit more about some of the experiences of our users. Since we have made Browsertrix accessible in a hosted service, we've been able to support a wide range of users, including national libraries, journalists, marketing organizations, performing arts companies, individual journalists. And I just wanted to share that one point of difference between us and other web archiving tools is that we allow multiple folks to collaborate in one instance, which is super helpful. And I've seen a few national libraries overseas be able to bring a lot of their team members and colleagues out of silos. So it's unique to see not only the web archiving team or the library team crawl together in their instance. We've also seen folks from HR, finance, education, tons of different departments collaboratively work together. And so as an archivist, it always really is exciting for me to see how our tools not only empower people to capture the web, but really also bring them out of silos, which they were before. And I'm sure all of the archivists on this call can attest and affirm how difficult sometimes it is working in silos and working on projects individually. And so I do think that's one of the great benefits of the tools that we have. Also, we have individual user plans that are accessible on our website. But if you are part of an institution who has a larger goal or a larger crawling scope, you can absolutely reach out to me at Camille@webrecorder.org. And we can definitely schedule time to talk more about what are your web archiving goals, what is the scope that you need. We do have a range of pro plans for larger organizations, but we also do provide a range of custom plans as well if our current offerings don't meet your needs. In the chat, Ilya has also just shared a free 7-day trial link. So for those of you on this call who want to continue to sign up in your own instance, you can go ahead and select that link in the chat. You can also feel free to share that link with your colleagues from your organization if they weren't able to join us today. Yes, and so Tessa is now on our starter plans. So these plans on our website are really geared towards individuals. And so you can see there's different tiers based on their crawling needs. A lot of individuals, right? If you're a journalist or you're an independent archivist, you may just need the starter, standard, or plus plan. But if you realize that you and folks in your organization have larger scopes, larger initiatives to capture anything, you can definitely schedule a demo with myself. We can learn a bit more about your needs. And that schedule a demo will take you to a Calendly link to book time with me. If this calendar does not meet the needs of you or your team, you can email me directly and I will definitely schedule a time that best works for your group. Also, doesn't matter if your group is international in different time zones. As I mentioned before, a lot of our folks in our Browsertrix community are located all across the globe: South America, Central America, Europe, the Middle East. And we're also empowering different activist groups and user groups to also make web archiving accessible. If you have additional questions as a user on this site, you can also tap into support resources that we provide as well. We do have a huge community that's in constant conversation on GitHub. And we also do have a large community chat on Discord where folks can continue to connect with us and learn more about our tools. I'm really so excited that we were all able to connect today together and that we were empowered to learn how to capture and crawl websites in real time. I definitely, and everyone here at the Webrecorder team, we really understand the power of being able to explore and test tools together in real time. And as we know, the web keeps changing and ever evolving, so will our internal workflows and our practices. And so for those of you who have signed up with us today, as you continue crawling and testing out the tools, if you have any additional questions, that we may not have answered on today's call, you can definitely shoot us an email at support@webrecorder.org and we'll definitely get back to you. But I definitely just want to hold space again for a moment. If anyone would like to lift up any questions that they have or even comments, if you don't have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat.
Thanks, Camille. I just want to add one last thing that since we promised that you could walk away with your own web archives, any of the crawls that you ran today, well, we'll probably delete the workshop organization. You can just download those Waxy files, and then you will have those crawls with you on your computer. You could upload them somewhere else, and then you could, once you download them, you could use the replay webpage tool, which is available online and free to browse those web archives at any time. Yeah, so like any of the crawls, if you go to the Waxy Files tab Uh, and yeah, and then from there you could download yeah, let's look at one of the yeah, and so you could just click on that link and that will download that file locally for you. And then that web archive is yours. And then you could go into Replay web page and open it. And that will just open it on your computer using Replay web page. It doesn't upload it anywhere. That's yours to keep. Yeah, so that's kind of the one of the hallmarks of our tools is that all your data is yours. You can put it wherever you want to. You can delete it anytime. Yeah, and yeah, happy to answer any additional questions that come up.
Thank you so much, Ilya. Also wanted to mention that if you are currently utilizing the tool or you do have the ability to schedule automated crawls. So even if you launch a crawl and you are in the browser-based platform, and if you need to navigate away from that or step away from your desk, it will continue to go ahead and capture the websites. Also wanted to share a little bit more, Tessa, if you could navigate to the scheduling part of developing a workflow. That you do have different capabilities of scheduling your automated crawls on a recurring basis. So that could be a weekly frequency, a daily frequency, a monthly frequency. Now, please note, if you do schedule recurring crawls, it will duplicate the crawl name when it's complete and add a number after the crawl name. So please feel free to log back in to update the name of that crawl. Also wanted to remind folks that all of our crawls are signed, sealed, and authenticated. And so they are legitimate in what is being captured. They are not being manipulated after the capture is complete. And if you need to add any additional information or metadata or notes to the crawl, you can do so in the workflow settings. And you also have the ability to do so once the crawl is complete. Yes, we also have our user guide embedded every step of the way. So if there's any terminology or any configuration that you have additional questions about, you can go ahead and open up that user guide and this pop-up window will appear right next to you facilitating your crawl. And in the review settings section, there is an opportunity for you to save the workflow if you did not want to go ahead and facilitate it again. And what Tessa is showing, you also have the ability to duplicate your workflow settings. So if you facilitated a crawl and you're like, this is beautiful, this is an amazing workflow, I want to continue to do this and go ahead and duplicate it for a recurring crawl, you have the ability to select that option, duplicate workflow. It will spit out all of that same configuration. And you have the ability to either save it or schedule it for future crawling. A lot of folks sometimes ask us, how can I add extra people to my organization account? If you navigate over to the settings section and you come down to the members, you will be able to see all of your users and you can invite a new member easily by selecting that button on the top right. Now, when you invite a new member, they do not have to have the same domain as your organization email if you are working with fellows or third-party collaborators. And once you add their email, you are able to select the role of usage that they have within the software. So you can invite them as a viewer. If it's a stakeholder, you can invite them as a crawler, folks who will just have the ability to crawl. And now admins have the ability to do everything, including managing your subscription and your billing details, changing your organization name, etc. And also on the left-hand side in your org settings, you will be able to see more about billing and your crawling quotas. So if you are inviting a new individual to your team, you can remind them of what those quotas are. Now, when we're thinking about working in a collaborative crawling environment, if you navigate, Tessa, please over to archived items. When your archived items are complete, you will see all of this information to the side of it, the date created, the size, etc. And you will also be able to sort them by the date or the crawler or the user that is facilitating crawls alongside with you. So if you needed to build collections and you needed to filter your results by only your crawls and not everyone else in your team, you do have the ability to do so. Also wanted to note that your crawl workflows cannot be deleted, right? The ways in which you set up the scope of the crawl will always live there. But when it comes to the output of the crawl, which is the archived item, you do have the ability to delete any archived items that you don't need, even after you download them or if you didn't need to utilize them anymore. What else? And then with collections, there are no limits on the collections that you can create. We do not charge folks by users. We do not charge by the amount of collections. Whether you want to make 5 or 5,000, totally up to you. By default, your collections will be private. And so you see that icon shows that it's private. Only you and anyone sharing the logins on this instance can see those collections privately. Whereas if it has the green icon, it has been enabled to be shareable through that URL link or the embed code. Now, just be mindful if you are embedding shareable URLs to stakeholders or collaborators, just be mindful if you all are making a decision to no longer have the collection public facing, just reminding you internally to adjust your workflows to give a reminder before you change it back to private. You also have the ability on the top right hand where it says new collection to also upload collections. If you were familiar with us by either using our browser extensions or have other web archived files, you do have the ability to upload those waxy files right there. Absolutely. You can also add tags to your crawls and your web archives in case you need to identify them and you are working on specific goals. You can absolutely utilize your tags if that makes it easier for your team in organizing your digital collections that you built. There are a lot of individuals who do have legal requirements about how they are storing their web archived files and their repositories. So if you are from an institution that has certain requirements from your IT team, we are more than happy to also have conversations with them to support and empower your workflows so that you can also take your files and back them up in your respective repositories. We have about 5 minutes left in today's webinar. Again, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and actively crawling. There's nothing more fun than working together. And just wanted to give you all another 5 minutes to ask any questions or comments in the chat before we wrap up today's webinar.
While we wait for questions, I realized when we were going through the settings and how to invite members, that there's another kind of new feature that's sort of neat that's worth pointing out, which is crawling defaults. So we had questions from users over time that were like, hey, like we always want to use the same custom user agent on our crawls, or we always by default want to have the same limits. So you actually have the ability now under settings to set certain defaults that will be applied to every new workflow that you create. Now, when you're creating that new workflow, you can always override them and change them. But for example, if we set, I would not recommend doing this, we could set not a real user agent to be our user agent as by default. And then when we go create a new workflow and we look at the browser settings, that's automatically been applied in an overwritable way. We have a question. Can you connect an individual account to an organization account? Yeah, like Ilya said in the chat, all users are part of organizations. Even if you have like our starter plan and it's only one person using it, that one person still has their own organization and that user account belongs within it. Now, if you have, say, if you as a person have your, your work has a Browsertrix account, and maybe you're working on a community archives project that independently has one. If you use the same email, you can basically connect those accounts, and so you would see all of the organizations that you belong to and be able to swap back and forth between them.
Any other final questions or any issues that folks ran into? I know we already looked at some crawls that had potential play issues, but yeah, if anyone else had something that work or didn't work. I see there's a crawl of Facebook for sites like Facebook and other social media. You pretty much have to create a browser profile and log in. So if it wasn't logged in, it probably just captured the login page, and unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that. But the approach to that would be to create a workflow, or sorry, to create a browser profile, log in, and then run the crawl with the profile applied. And we wish it was easier, but the social media sites really don't make it easy for us to archive them. Yeah, and then same for Instagram as well. Generally requires login in order to be able to actually capture anything other than the login page.
One final thing about that, and we say this in the interface when you're creating browser profiles, we say it in the user guide, but we always make a point to say it in calls too, so I want to make sure we say it today. When you're using accounts to crawl social media sites and applying them in a browser profile, make sure to not use your personal accounts. Create a separate account. You don't want your personal account getting blocked by a service because it was being used for archiving and they decided that was against their terms of service. And you also don't want other people in your organization probably to be able to log into your individual account through that browser profile. So it's always a good idea, always a good practice to use dedicated archiving accounts for websites.
Thank you, Tessa. Thank you, Ilya. And so we are at the end of our webinar. Again, we want to thank you from the entire Webrecorder team for taking time out of your day, for joining us, for crawling with us together in real time. I also dropped in the chat, if you have any additional questions as you continue exploring and crawling, you can contact us at support@webrecorder.org. And you'll also receive a recap email from this call, including the recording for you to watch again and share. So thank you so much, everyone. We hope you have a really amazing day and week. And if we don't see you again, please enjoy this holiday season going into the new year. But thank you all again so much. Have a beautiful day. Thank you. Thank you.